Time being 7 o'clock, I call the Hastings City Council meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, and let the roll reflect that we do have a majority of council with the absence of Councilmember House. This evening, we are here to welcome new employees, Sawyer Jackson and Brandon Lubinski. And our Public Works Director, Ryan Stemsky, will introduce them. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. We do have two new employees that recently started in our Public Works Department. Brandon Lubinski is our new heavy equipment mechanic. He's attended Indian Head Technical College with a degree in agriculture mechanics. He's got 10 years of experience with heavy equipment that he brings to the city of Hastings. He lives in Ellsworth, Wisconsin with his wife Jenny and their two children, Owen and Layla. He enjoys working on and riding his motorcycle in his spare time. He also enjoys hot rods, metal fabrication, and demolition cars. He enjoys taking his kids swimming and biking, and he's extremely excited about his new role and his new schedule at the city of Hastings. He's excited that his new team has been so helpful. He said that, I didn't say that. With Brandon's past experience, knowledge of his trade, attention to detail, and calm approach to stressful situations, Brandon is proving to be a great addition to our department. We'd like to officially have the council welcome Brandon Lubinski to City of Hastings.
Welcome.
Next, we have Sawyer Jackson. Sawyer Jackson is our new Public Works operator. Sawyer went to Inver Hills Community College with a degree in construction management. He's got 6 years of experience in civil construction. He lives in Welch with his wife, Emily. He loves to hunt and spend time outdoors. When asked what he likes to do in his spare time, he says, "I know it sounds stupid, but really, work. It's the truth." New boss, maybe that was the quote out of context, but I'll take it. He does truly enjoy operating construction equipment, and he's been operating equipment since he was a little kid, and it shows. Sawyer likes to jump right in and to be involved. He isn't afraid to ask questions, and his personality fits right in the Public Works Department. We're extremely excited to have him as part of our team. Welcome, Sawyer Jackson.
Welcome. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Council members, are there any corrections or to the meeting from the regular meeting on August 19th? Okay. Comments from the audience. At this time, we will hear live comments via the audience or from Zoom. If you would like to speak to the council at this time, please step up to the podium, give your name and address, and tell us what would you like to talk to us about.
Peter Likes, 3000 East 4th Street, Hastings, Minnesota, better known as Cowtown. I'm the president of the East Hastings Improvement Association. I've been that for 3 years. I was one of the founding fathers of the East Hastings Improvement Associations in the late 1960s, early 1970s, when the city and the federal government tried to close down the east side of the tracks because of condemned wells. So then we went to work and we obtained funds from the federal and the state government and the city of Hastings. We put sewer and water in the city of Hastings, and we saved East Hastings, okay? So I've been there since 1972. I've been on the board of directors ever since, and I've been the president the last 3 years down at the East Hastings Improvement Association. In 1987, just a little bit further in my life, the 4th Street Bridge used to be a cattle bridge. In 1953, it was condemned. So Jim Kleinschmidt was working here as a city engineer, and I got a tip from a Minnesota State Highway coordinator. He said, "Go down and tell Kleinschmidt to tip the pile over." And on the bottom of the pile was the funding for the 4th Street Bridge in 1987. Didn't cost the city anything. So that brings us up to the park. I know right after we had our annual meeting on Tuesday night of this week, I got a letter from Chris Jenkins, and then you've all got basically the same thing. We're all on board, okay? We understand that. The project is now about 3 years behind. It's costing us money. It's time somebody's gonna have to say, yep, we made a mistake, they made a mistake, but we can't go back and forth and say that. The thing is, we have to get it done, and we'll figure out where we're gonna get the money to pay for it at a later date. And with that, thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Council, are there any items to be considered? Okay, council, I would accept a motion to approve the consent agenda. Councilmember Liefeld and Councilmember Pemble. Sorry, I didn't hear. Yeah. Any discussion, council? All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. And that motion is passed. Tonight, under awarding of contracts, we have the continued public hearing for the special use permit and the cannabis, the Hastings Tobacco, 1769 Market Boulevard. And for this item, we will have an introduction by City Administrator Dan Waticho, followed by a public hearing, followed by a recommendation to table action on the special use permit and the retail license. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Mayor. What is before us tonight is a public hearing on application from Hastings Tobacco at 1769 Market Boulevard. It's in the shopping mall that Cub Foods is in. They applied for a special use permit as well as a retailer's license to sell cannabis product. In this case, it would be the 0.3% THC product is all that could be licensed at this point. Part of the process for the special use permit is there has to be a public hearing. We give notice to everybody within 350 feet. That was noticed to be held 2 weeks ago at the last council meeting, but because the applicant or the applicant's landlord wasn't ready for this to go forward, we said, all right, we won't do it here in August. Let's continue this in September. So that's what brings us here tonight. My understanding is the landlord, owner of the building, and the tenant, the business itself, still are not in agreement. Essentially, the landlord is saying, no, you will not sell THC under our lease. They have essentially 60 days from a couple of weeks ago to straighten it out. So our recommendation tonight is we gave notice of the public hearing. Let's have the public hearing, see if any comments from neighbors within 350 feet or the general public want to weigh in on their thoughts about the special use permit. But then the actual SUP itself, as well as the license, ask that council table those since the landlord still hasn't consented, but the tenant hopes that can convince. They have until, I think, late October to get that cleared up. So we can bring this back, unless they get stuff straightened out sooner, we can bring this back second meeting in October to take action, which if the landlord's in disagreement, I think the action will be to turn it down, but give them the chance to work things out internally. So with that, can certainly take questions on the process itself. But really, I think all that's before you tonight is to open a public hearing and receive any comments on the application.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Council, I will open the public hearing first, and we will go forward after that. At this time, I will open the public hearing. Anyone wish to speak to the cannabis topic right now? Anyone on
There's
Zoom?
nobody on Zoom, period.
No one on Zoom? One more time, anyone wish to speak to the cannabis? Okay, at this time, I will close the public hearing and council discussion. Council? For tabling it? Councilmember Verichoff? Councilmember Fox?
I would make the motion to table the license conversation to, and the other piece to October 21st, 2024.
Thank you, Councilmember Fox, and second by Councilmember Liefeld. All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed to that motion state by saying nay, and that motion prevails. Tonight, under reports from city staff, we have our Public Works Director with us to receive an update on the water treatment plant siting study. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you again, Mayor and City Council. Okay. I think we're all working here. Okay, so yeah, tonight we're going to talk about the water treatment plant siting study. So we've been putting efforts on this study with some council direction, and we'll go through the specifics here tonight. I wanted to start out with just a graphic of where we're at on treatment plant number 1. This is a treatment plant located in our industrial park. So this is a site that we're not looking at evaluating. It was for sites 2 and 3, and we'll get into those specific locations. But this is I think this building from base to peak is about 46 feet tall, and it's about 100 by 100 feet. So this is just a visual of kind of where we're at with the industrial park or water treatment plant number 1 building. So just to kind of refresh folks' minds, we are working through planning and design of 3 decentralized treatment plants. They include granular activated carbon vessels for PFAS removal and ion exchange vessels for nitrate removal. So that's the technology going into the treatment plants themselves. Like I stated before, depending on how many vessels we get in these buildings or how many wells we are removing the contaminants from, the plants are going to be nearly 50 feet tall from floor to peak. And we need approximately that 10,000 square feet or 100 by 100 feet to get the components in: hallways, bathrooms, offices, storage rooms, et cetera, loading, unloading the vessels, and those types of things. What that really equates to when we're looking for sites is approximately 1 to 2 acres, and that kind of depends on the context. We've gotten as small as an acre when sites kind of have some of the driveway and the buffering already set in place. But we like to look for a little bit more than that if we want to incorporate some grading improvements, some flattening, some berming, landscaping elements, driveway turnaround scenarios, and then stormwater management as well. So that's kind of why we have a range depending on the sites of what size we're looking for. So just to go back again to the feasibility report, we had water treatment plant locations at that time. We had treatment plant number 1, like I showed you on the front sheet there, over in the industrial park. Tonight we're here to talk about treatment plant number 2, which is currently in the feasibility report shown in Lions Park. And we'll kind of cover why that was shown in that location. And the same thing for treatment plant number 3, located down in Wallen Park, near wells 4 and 9. So that's just to kind of go back and remember where the feasibility report took us. These were just those representation of sites near wells and on city-owned land. When we started putting the feasibility report together, we got to remember we were trying to present a shovel-ready project to the state legislature and to our conversations of funding. So that's where we started in the feasibility. Those locations were never finalized, and they are subject to change. So I said that before, I'm saying that again tonight. We did hear feedback on the feasibility report, and council did provide staff a strong preference to locate sites 2 and 3, treatment plant 2 and 3, outside of residential neighborhoods. So we factored that in. Some of our specific water treatment plant siting factors include the land area. Is it owned? Is it acquirable? Right? So we factored that into our matrix that we'll touch on in a little bit. We look at the proximity to wells and raw water mains, the proximity to our trunk distribution mains and storage tanks to build into the built environment into the system. And then it's important to understand our proximity and distances from pressure zone facilities, booster pumps, pressure reducing valves, et cetera. Also, we need to flush when we get the new media in these vessels. We need to do a thorough flushing with Department of Health regulations, so we need to be by trunk sanitary sewer. We've got to discharge that wastewater in a large volume to run the plant. So looking for proximity of trunk sewers. Transportation corridors, can we get in and out? And then obviously site topography. Is the lay of the land conducive? Okay, with the council goal in our siting study of existing residential neighborhoods, this graphic kind of gives us an illustration of how Hastings is built out. We have a lot of residential. We have some middle school property, we have elementary school property, we have a golf course, but essentially there's not a lot of locations when you look at the boundary here and the black dotted line of Hastings. Just this graphic is showing we have a lot of existing residential neighborhoods to stay out of. So then we add into that, here is our future zoned residential neighborhoods. So looking at our existing neighborhoods and looking at our future starts to kind of limit where we're honing in our siting of these treatment plants. So that's important to keep in mind as we roll through this. Another thing to think about is the undulation of the land. So we work on currently 2 pressure zones. We have a main pressure zone kind of in that yellowish color. And then we have a low pressure zone in the blue. And then we're going to have a future high pressure zone in the red there. So what's important to note there is we can't site treatment plants up into high pressure zones. We're just not going to get the system to work when we do that. So we have some limitations with pressure zones as well that we have to work around. So in the engineering analysis, what this all means is we're looking for a location that's hydraulically feasible, right? It's got to work. You know, you have a grade line from pumping from the bottom of a well in an aquifer up to a tower. We've got to site ourselves somewhere in that grade line. So that's the first goal. We're also looking to have an efficient system, right? So we're minimizing major losses. So these are the friction losses that come into a system when we're running the modeling and seeing if these systems work. We're trying to not impact the pumping rates from the wells. We get 1,200 GPM out of our pumps in our wells. The more complex we make the system, the less efficient that pumping rate to fill up our towers becomes. So we're looking at that. We have to apply industry standards such as pressure surge. You know, that is something when we turn all the wells on, the industry standard is we have to look at 10 PSI or less pressure delivered to our homes and our customers. If we get anything more than that, I surely will get complaints or we'll be blowing fixtures and things of that nature. So we try to temper that, obviously. We apply our AWWA standards, and we have to look at the hydraulics specifically here. We can't have max velocities over 5 feet per second. We can't have head loss greater than 10 feet per 1,000 feet. So there's some standards that we apply that go into the modeling efforts as well. We also are looking at more piping. So when we look at more piping, both the raw, which comes from the well directly to a treatment plant, and the distribution, which leaves from the treatment plant back out into the system, it not only increases capital costs and impact along our roads, digging up streets and those sorts of things, but also kind of equates to a less efficient system. So we got to think about life cycle costs. Every water main we put in, that particular distance, we're eventually going to have to replace someday, right? So we look at the life cycle costs, and then just the pure additional maintenance and operations of additional lines. We have to think about that. We have flushing procedures, gate valve exercising, more pipe, more prone to issues and things that can come up over time. So those are the things we're thinking about on the engineering side. So getting down to treatment plant number 2 first here, things that we took into consideration specific to this site is obviously property owner feedback. We went out and talked to folks in the region, in the area. we had to think about some of the bordering elements. So we have all wells that are being treated, that is well 3, well 5, and well 7, north of Trunk Highway 55, okay? So our well field, all 3 wells are north of 55. Trunk Highway 55 kind of serves as a border in our siting study. Trunk highways aren't optimal to have your trunk water mains underneath. If you have a break or an issue or you need to get at it, that's a pretty impactful shutdown with traffic, and it's very expensive. They also come with MnDOT requirements to case your pipe with steel casing, and so it's a higher cost per foot. So we just naturally, if you don't need to, you don't go across trunk highways. So we looked at that area. Also up here, in addition to that, the proximity to the well field, 3, 5, and 7, matters in relationship to the treatment plant and the ground storage reservoir. So our system, you can't see them very well, but well 7, if my pointer's working, yep. Well 7 is over in this location for context. Well 3 is up in Lions Park, and well 5 is right next to the existing ion exchange or nitrate treatment plant off of 55 over here. Right behind well 5 is the ground storage reservoir. So all these 3 wells pump into the ground storage reservoir. So it's designed such that that tank is set to serve our low zone, and then there's booster stations there that pump up to the high zone. So we can feed both the high and low from this exact point. So wherever we move a treatment plant in proximity to this system, we have to get it back to these key components of the system. So that's why I say it matters where we're siting in relationship to these 3 pieces of infrastructure. And then obviously topography matters. For example, like when we're looking in other areas of Lions Park, you know, that is 40 feet down gradient from the north frontage road. It serves as a ponding basin currently, and there's some storm sewer routing through this location. So we're looking at all those factors. Okay, so in our matrix, in our comparison for treatment plant number 2, we did look at the feasibility location at Lions Park and kind of started to build in some advantages and disadvantages and bring in our impact of the neighborhoods and additional piping, and then we modeled to make sure they worked. So that's basically what we did. This presentation I'll definitely get on the website and get out to the council, but just to kind of cover what I grabbed a few samples of some key sites that worked for us to come into some comparisons here. The Lions Park site, obviously city-owned, it is an advantage. It's centered between wells 5 and 7, so right kind of in the middle of that well field I was talking about. There's existing piping that already exists, so there's a relationship between wells 3 and 5, so we can take advantage of that. And then there's trunk sewer in place, so some advantages there. Some disadvantages, obviously, in a residential neighborhood, you know, so right tucked in a residential neighborhood where the grades are conducive for the park, and then on a local road. So the modeled results, this is where we get into the pressure surge being acceptable and the hydraulics being acceptable. So we're good to go on that front. Site 2.2 in the map is probably better known as the Carboni site. This is adjacent, some positives, some advantages, or it is adjacent to the existing treatment plant. So it's right next door. So it can kind of serve as a campus there. Being that it would be next door, we could take advantage of the existing nitrate plant and expand it. So that comes at a cost savings. The reason why that works out that way is because we need to send our raw water into the PFAS removal first. That's the first thing. We need to get the PFAS out before we send it into nitrate removal, so we don't contaminate all the nitrate components. So it's just the train of operations of how this works. Again, we can take advantage of 3 and 5 already being connected, and it's on a collector road system. So really all we have to do is bring well 7 a little bit further to this particular site. Some of the disadvantages, obviously this includes site acquisition, so there's a process there. There's added piping, bringing well 7 a little bit further, and there's no trunk sewer, so we have to make accommodations there as well. The added impact is about an additional 2,400 feet of pipe. Again, here, the modeling results all check out with our industry standards. And then moving a little bit further, I'll just go back to the map. So that was, we started out at 2-1, which is Lions Park, 2-2, the Carboni site, and then 2-5 is a county site off Pleasant. And so on that 2-5 site, again, this is near well 5, so it's near one element or one piece of infrastructure. It is on a collector road. Some disadvantages are it does include site acquisition. It has a lot of stormwater concerns. The county has had some challenges there with 100-year high water marks and some flooding during events. They also take this from their campus. They store their snow there when needed. And so it would take a lot of grading, and it has some stormwater concerns on it right now. It comes with some added piping, and there's no trunk sewer at this site as well. This adds about 3,600 feet, so a little bit more than the Carboni site as well. The modeling checks out and meets all regulations for this site. So going through the engineering matrix, the favorable or the preferred site from the analysis, taking all the feedback into account, was the Carboni site. So this is a snapshot of the existing treatment plant. In the back, we have the ground storage reservoir. You can see that behind the trees. And then you have the Carboni site, which would be in this location. Basically they share a property line. So just for some context there. Okay, moving on to treatment plant number 3. Treatment plant number 3, we also had to look at several elements when citing options here. Definitely taking in property owner feedback, so talking to sites that might be conducive. We took that into account. We took into account this treatment plant removes PFAS and nitrates from well 4 and well 9, so we had to look at what's the proximity there. We had to stay out of getting into the future high zone, which is identified in the red hatch on this graphic. We also have the Vermilion River kind of on the south side here that we had to think about crossing it. And then also the map and the graphic I showed you earlier, the proximity to future residential. So some issues or constraints that we had to look at. When you look at a snapshot of the matrix of some sites that stood out in this analysis, again, we had the Wallen Park site, 3-1 in the feasibility study, city-owned location of future well number 9, minimal, some piping extension, but minimal. We're just bringing well 4 up to this location and along a collector road. Disadvantages again here is in a residential setting and no trunk sewer at this site, so we'd have to make accommodations. The modeling works out for this site as well. We moved over to the C's property, the church property, over off of General Sieben. They have a large site that you could look at acquiring what you needed. The height of our building would be less than the church. The church is nearly 70 feet from base to peak, so we would be less than that. There's a 16-inch trunk water main in General Sieben Drive area, so we'd have trunk water main at that site, and it's off a collector road. Some disadvantages are site acquisition here again, and I have to go through a process. We would have to annex this piece into the city, so it's a little sliver that is not annexed into the city at the moment. So we'd have to go through a process there. There's some added piping to get over to this location. We'd have to take into account future residential over here. And then again, no trunk sewer to this site. So extending trunk sewer or building additional tanks on the site to accommodate the rate back into our system. The added impact or added footage of pipe is about 1,800 feet, and the site does model out with our constraints. Then if we go look at the county site, so just to here again, 3-1 is well number 9 in Wallen Park area. 3-2 is, here's that C site I was talking about. And then now jumping down way over off of 46 in Pleasant, there's a county site 3-5 here that we'll talk about next. This again is a large site. You could acquire what you needed from it. It has a 14-inch trunk water main nearby, and it's off a collector road. Some disadvantages are it would require site acquisition. You'd have to, again, deal with the future residential. We add a river crossing to the system, which can be expensive and challenging. And again, this site, no trunk sewer. This adds about 4,500 feet to connect up the wells, so a little more piping. But definitely models out in the system and it would work. And then the last site that we took a snapshot of, if I go back to my map, off of General Sieben Drive in 46 is 3-7. This is actually a city-owned parcel. So it's a site that accommodates the needs of the treatment plant. It is city-owned. It's positioned for trunk water, just meaning it's where we're looping future trunk water main. And it is on a collector road. So some advantages there, some disadvantages. It currently serves as kind of a ponding basin area. So it would have some significant grading, not as much as other sites, but it would have some grading. It has a river crossing. It would move this trunk loop to an earlier time frame to accommodate treatment. And there would be no trunk sewer. So we'd have to deal with that as well. This site adds about 5,500 feet of impact or piping across the city. Site models out as well. So through the engineering matrix analysis, the preferred site was the C's property. You can see here off this is General Sieben Drive. You can see the church, just the peak there back in the photo. Here is Heritage Ridge. Here's kind of the fourth edition. You can see in the lighter colored green here. And then this is the site we're talking about back in the crop field there. Okay. So with that, we'll move to questions from the council next slide. But tonight we want to receive feedback from the council, take questions, concerns, comments. And then our goal would be to schedule a follow-up meeting at the next meeting, September 16th council, where we would, if we get general consensus or want to move in that direction, we'd get a closed meeting per statutes 13D.05 subdivision 3C to develop offers for purchasing of real property if that comes into play. So how that comes into play and how we could strategize on that front. So that's kind of what staff has for presentation. I would open it up for any questions.
Thank you, Ryan. Council? Discussion, Councilmember Liefeld?
Thanks, Your Honor. Ryan, didn't we recently sell that, what was it, 3.5? The site at Pleasant and 46 to the county, or how long have they owned that? That county property?
When was that, Cody?
Oh, it was
The
privately held?
the county purchased it, you're correct. I don't think we didn't.
So it was a recent? About a year. Okay, but it was purchased from the owner of the property at that time?
Yes.
Okay. And then, so your preferred site, have we reached out at all to C's? Has there been any conversations regarding annexing or purchasing that property?
We've spoke, yep, we did go and talk to several property owners. C's was one of them, and they were favorable in working with the city.
Okay, and then to site number 2, the Carboni site, same thing there, we've been in contact with.
Yep, Joe Core Holdings owns the property, and we've been in conversations with them, and they would be favorable working with the city on a process.
Wonderful. And then just a side note, since we've got so many people here, so as we complete site 1 out in the industrial park, we have talked and are looking into a process for residents to be able to come, once that site is up and running, where residents can take their bottles and get water for drinking and such, correct? I don't know that anyone's heard about that. I know
Correct.
we've talked about it at council, but could you maybe just touch on that just a little bit, since we've got some people here?
Yeah.
And then explain in that with that one up and running, that one's not running to the city because we have this mixed system. So let you. Blended, thank you, blended system.
Sure, sure. Yeah, and that's why we have 3 decentralized treatment plants that kind of are in the works until our project is complete. All of our wells blend and mix up in the towers, and so really we're not mitigated, unfortunately, because we have PFAS above limits in all of 6 of our wells and our 7th well, so 7th future well. And so we really need to remove the PFAS from all wells done in the 3 treatment plant sites. So obviously, removing treatment plant number 1 would remove PFAS from wells 6 and 8. So that's a start. It lowers our overall, but our wells fill the towers in a complex matrix that, in busy times, hot, dry summer months, we might be running all wells. And other times we try to save the life of pumps, and we kind of do a balancing act of feeding and resting and feeding and resting. So you really can be fed from and blended from all different sorts. And so that's the blending complication. As far as treatment plant number 1, what we're building into the design is to have a residential fill station that would be conveniently located. So right by the treatment, the PFAS removal, when it comes out to the system, that we could tie a service in and provide a fill station for residents. So we have something like that now for contractors that doesn't have PFAS removal at our public works site. So we've been in the fill station business. It'd be downsized not for large commercial vehicles, but it would be something where people could bring their jugs of water and turn on a spigot and fill up PFAS removal water.
Thank you, Councilmember Layfield. Councilmember Verichov.
Thank you, Mayor. Brian, thank you very much for this incredibly informative, kind of mind-boggling presentation here. This is not my first time hearing all of this, and yet it's still good to see everything laid out, to see the maps, to see the matrix. I had 2 questions. Councilmember Liefeld kind of covered one of them, which was what was the interest and kind of what was the sense from those 2 owners around Seas and Carbonis. And so could you just speak just briefly in terms of public engagement or what our process is as a city when we are thinking about building something there and that could possibly impact residential folks? How do we make sure that we are hearing from them? I know that you and Cody do have due diligence when it comes to that, and I just want to make sure that we're being as open as we can with a group here tonight and folks that might be watching at home. So could you talk for that just for a second? And then I just have a question on costs too.
Yeah, Councilmember Virchow, as far as the public engagement process, we got to keep in mind, even though we're trying to move fast to bring mitigation and removal of PFAS to our residents, we're also very early on in the process. And so there's a time and a place when we start to pull enough information together that we can go and engage the public. Typically, that's done when we have agreed upon sites, we have enough of a design to show what it's going to look like, and then we can go to the go to the public, have an open house style meeting, a year in advance of its construction or so, and get out and get feedback as to that site. In this particular case, this is something we can talk further on in a closed session meeting if there's an additional step we want to build in on these sites or not, because it's a little bit of a unique process. It's not our typical, we have our project and we complete enough of our design and we go back out. This is something where if that'll help inform on the siting study, we could build that into the process. Just not really standard. Like I said, we usually go out when we're a little bit closer to the construction, 6 months to a year out in advance.
I appreciate that. And I'm not trying to say that we should hold up the process at any point or anything like that. But I think that we all know, and all council members here have gotten many, many emails from constituents that are concerned. And so I just wanted to make sure that we were being as clear as we possibly could, so that folks that might have concerns know that their input is valued. We appreciate when they come to meetings and they tell us what's on their mind and what they're thinking. And then my second question was, in the memo that we had in our council packet where it listed some of the estimated costs, I know that these are, there's a large range in terms of what we're thinking about these. What I read was a potential $500,000 to $4.5 million increase in terms of what site ends up being utilized. And so for future city conversations, when we're talking about this, I love the matrix where you broke it all down. And I'm wondering is, as we go forward with that, could you put some of that, even if it's just a range, just so that we have a sense of saying, we think that C's is gonna be 2 million more versus X, which might be 3 million more. Because while all of those things are incredibly important, I know to Public Works and to Engineering Department, I know that as a council, one of the things that we're gonna hear from a lot of residents is going to be placement and it's gonna be cost.
Correct,
Okay.
yep. Good feedback, and I would say, out of respect, out of our discussions with property owners and some negotiations that may have to come here, we wanted to talk about the engineering merits first, and then we can definitely provide that information at our next council meeting.
Yes.
And kind of go through some of that, absolutely.
And again, this was incredibly helpful and informative, so thank you both for being here today. Thank you,
Thank you,
Mayor.
Councilmember Birchoff. Councilmember Fox.
Thank you, Your Honor. Okay, I'm going to repeat some things back to you, and you can correct me as I do. And then, Ryan, I have 3 questions. So I want to back up to when we started the process of figuring out how to mitigate PFAS, and then what that looked like, because we knew that the numbers were changing in about March last year, or this year, from the EPA. So this is April. Thank you. This is why. Okay, so we knew in April that the rates were gonna, or the levels were gonna change, and we were gonna need to mitigate, and we're being mandated to mitigate our water in Hastings. After that, we moved into action. Well, we've been activating for a long time, building our narrative and trying to tell our story so that we could find funding sources and find support that is greater than what we as a city can do alone, because this is such an enormous project. Okay, you're shaking your head yes, so that's good. So government doesn't move quickly, we know that, and we have been open and understanding to feedback and stakeholder engagement along the way. As stakeholders got more and more engaged, we heard feedback and were reacting and hopefully responding in a respectful way. And I believe we are, and I'm really grateful for that from all sorts. We add PFAS to every first meeting of the month, and I know many people tune into it, so that's great news. We're trying to mitigate PFAS and nitrates for safety of our customers and our residents. And our residents are currently concerned about their comfort with their properties and their values, right? And then the cost of what we're putting in front or behind or around or next to everything that we have. And then our future residents are concerned about growth, right? Where are these gonna be in relation to where I'm gonna live in the future? So lots of things. All of this was presented to many people to try and find funding moving forward, right? So we had like tentative plans in place. You mentioned that nothing was finalized, it was all subject to change. So I'm just repeating that out loud to the public again. Because I appreciate that point, because we just don't move quickly here, which I've heard from many of you in this room, actually. But proximity, location to pressure zone, undulation of the land is something that I've never said before out loud. And then friction losses, there's so much to consider when we're considering a site that's actually even feasible. So I think one thing, we don't even know what all of this means, right? So up here, we've been talking about this for years, and we still can't figure out the right site, right? So I'm just saying all of this out loud to retell our story that we don't have an answer yet. Is that correct? We have
Right,
potential answers.
Right, we have some feasible sites to sit down and grind out and talk
Yeah,
about.
yeah,
if we wanna move
especially
forward with.
because
Yes.
we're not gonna be shovel ready tomorrow. Right, okay, just saying all of that out loud. Okay. Thank you for your hard work. This is awesome. This is really, really clear and really helpful information for our public to know. I know some folks have been nervous about hearing that most locations are private. What does that mean? So this is helpful just to have some nailed down details about what we're actually talking about when we're talking about it. And I really appreciate how forthcoming you are with this information. So thank you. I know that's making people very pleased and feeling heard. So thank you. So my questions, Carboni site, which we should maybe not call them by their names, huh? Yeah. Site 2.2. It's only, according to the Dakota County GIS, is only 0.83 acres. You mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that the land, the 1,000 square feet, needs to be about an acre. Is that going to be troubling if we end up moving forward with a site that's too small? I didn't do all the calculations. But.
Yeah, Councilmember Fox, that's a great question. One of the advantages of that site is we can maximize nitrate treatment on its neighbor site.
Okay.
And we would expand the vessels as needed on that site. So we'd only need to build GAC or granular
Okay.
activated carbon vessels, making the site the building space a little bit smaller. And then they share the same property line, so piping would be interconnected between the two.
Love that.
If that makes sense.
It does.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much. My second question. I am going to say these out loud as well because this is where my heart hurts. The 0.6 million to 4.5 million for water treatment plant 2 and water treatment plant 3, 2.8 million to $7.2 million more. I would love to see that in the matrix as we are able to add it. I just wanted to echo Councilmember Virachow's request because when I read the first memo, I was like, okay. That's not a question, that's a request. My third question is, Ryan, and maybe this is more of a Dan question or perhaps Councilor Land's question. Like I mentioned earlier, government does not move fast. What does purchasing a property from the county look like? And how does that, like, what's the process? What's the timeline? Would we even hit the mitigation deadline? I'm just curious. I don't know.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, members of the council, and Councilmember Fox, that's a great question. Working with government can be sometimes more difficult than working with private property owners because they have a process they have to follow as well. So there would be a typical purchase agreement, just like you would see in any private land transaction, and it would have its due diligence, but there might be a few extra hoops and a lot of extra contingencies. Obviously, we require council approval. They require board approval. They would absolutely require an appraisal, and maybe a couple of them. So there might be just more process involved, and generally speaking, it's easier to work with the personalities of government because we all kind of get each other, and we understand we're speaking each other's love language when we exchange contracts and red lines. But the process just sometimes is longer because of the amount of hoops and people and committees that you have to go through.
Great, thank you. I have one more follow-up, but just from my experience on HEDRA, we have been working with some of our city property, talking to the county if they're interested, and long story short, you can watch those meetings too if you want to, but we're not willing to sell a property that at lower than its value. So I wanted to say that out loud because it's not like we would get this property for free, right? So we would still have a very great transaction between two governments, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Your Honor, do you need an action on this tonight? No.
No.
Just informative.
Just update.
Okay. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fox. Councilmember Lawrence.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say real quick, Ryan, thank you for you and your team putting this all together. I also want to thank the Residents Award 4 who definitely are making a statement, and I appreciate it and hold us accountable because obviously we're here for you guys. And you answered the call, and I really appreciate that. I just wanted to put that out there for everyone, so thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lawrence. Ryan, great job, great update. Love the visuals. Thank you to the residents for being a voice to us and we, you know, and trying to get us to listen, which I think staff really did listen and council did listen. It was a hard decision to see these in residence, even though if it was a park and we own the land, it was hard to still see it in a residential area. So I appreciate the due diligence that you have done. It's a big project. It's a big project, and financing it is even a bigger project. And know that we are still working on all of that. I mean, these people have worked their hearts and puts their hearts and souls into all of it, be it where it's going to be or how we're going to pay for it. Residents, yeah, we're going to have you step up a little bit for water rates, but we have to have clean water. And we're fighting, just so you know, we are fighting to have someone else pay for this because we did not do this on our own. So I think council appreciates everybody. And with that, I know, Ryan, we don't really need a motion, but we would like to, you'd like to have a motion to move the study forward, correct?
Just to schedule a follow-up
Okay.
to the September 16th meeting
Okay,
where
so
we
then-
can discuss
okay.
some of this follow-up.
Okay, Councilmember Fox?
Oh, I will make that motion with a comment.
Okay.
Sorry, I forgot my one other comment. Sorry, Ryan. I just want to be clear that this closed meeting is because this is privileged information. It's not because it's something we're not presenting. It's not a location we're not presenting. It's not a process we're not presenting. It's like privileged data about properties. So, and that will all become public once it's finalized. So I think that's valuable too.
Sure.
So I make
With
the
that,
motion.
you're making
Yeah.
a motion, okay? Councilmember Liefeld seconds. Additional new discussion, council. All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. And that motion prevails. Once again, Ryan and staff, thank you. Also under reports from city staff, we have a resolution of intent to participate. MnDOT Highway 55 Signal Replacement Project, SP 1910 through 57 Pleasant Drive and Westview intersections. And Ryan, you may continue.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. This item, I'm actually going to have our brand-new city engineer present. Cody has been working diligently with MnDOT on this project, and so he's got some information to share. I just wanted to let you know, this is a project in our capital improvement program. We haven't approved the budget yet, and so we'd be remiss not to bring this item forward and get council updated on the item and get feedback on the item, so that you understand where we're at with this project before you go into the budget voting cycle. And like I said, it's the preliminary budget's not approved yet, so we definitely didn't want to go out of sequence here. And on that front, MnDOT is requesting a resolution of commitment from the city, and so there's some reasoning why the timing didn't quite work out, and we wanted to bring that forward. So with that, Cody.
Thank you, Ryan. Welcome, Cody.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Seeing Highway 55 flashed up here, your first reaction might be similar to Ryan and I's. Don't we have enough infrastructure projects going on? But through some good conversations with MnDOT, we got up to speed as to why this is a good project and why the resolution before you tonight is for an intent to participate in the project. So jumping right into it, the existing signals at Pleasant Drive and Westview Drive are aging. You can see pretty clearly here, starting off at Pleasant Drive, the rust is starting to show through on the mast arms and on the signal poles quite obviously. If we jump over to Westview Drive, the story is quite the same. And so when Ryan and I dug in with MnDOT staff, that was our question. Why 2025? Explain, with everything else we've got going on, 61 coming, PFAS, you've been talked to about 42. Why now? So these signals are 41 and 38 years old respectively at Pleasant and Westview Drive, and traffic signals have a 25-year intended life. It's not to say that all traffic signals, when they become 25 years old, are instantly replaced, but that's sort of their intended life, so you can see we are a ways beyond that intended life there. It's an ideal window, an ideal year in 2025 to complete the project, because not doing so would kick this project in MnDOT's plans all the way to 2029. So then we would be talking about that signal over at Pleasant nearing 50 years old, almost doubling its intended life. There's also new design standards that are going to become in place from MnDOT. So we would not, if we did not support this project, we would not be talking about just delaying the cost. We'd be talking about delaying the cost and substantially increasing it in the future. There's new structural standards that are coming forward that future projects would implicate. And then obviously, as you'd expect with upgrading a signal that's 41 years old, there's safety and efficiency that's going to be achieved by new conversion to the latest technology, flashing yellow arrows, things of that sort. So taking a look at the improvements from an aerial view here, wanted to show this more because there are ancillary improvements that are going to take place. It's not just the traffic signals. There's going to be sidewalk and pedestrian ADA improvements at these intersections, minor storm sewer repairs. And then as part of installing these signals and the components necessary, MnDOT will have some patchwork, some utility work kind of all over the place. And instead of leaving us with a quilted intersection full of patches, they will be milling and overlaying the whole thing, so that we are left with a nice contiguous intersection in the areas you see here shown at Pleasant Drive, and then very similar scope on Westview Drive. And you can see here that the scope or the limits of the project actually extend out up to our south and north frontage roads. Those roads are currently in MnDOT right-of-way, and so that is why those ADA improvements will extend into that area, again with storm sewer and minor utility replacements along the way. So what does this mean for traffic impact? So you can understand the order of magnitude we're talking here is it's 2 weeks that MnDOT is anticipating traffic impacts. 1 week in each direction. So they'll be temporarily closing a portion of 55 westbound for a week and then eastbound for a week. So we kind of have 2 levels of detouring the project will create. This is the regional detour, so folks coming all the way through Hastings, truck traffic, we will try to send them around via Goodwin and 46 to 61 for that time period. And on the local level, we'll be looking to utilize General Sieben, South Frontage Road for folks needing to access businesses, access home in the area. So essentially from Sieben to South Frontage, and I believe that's River Street to the north, that portion would more or less be closed. And you can see the North Frontage Road would still remain open for access in that region as well. Because this would implicate South Frontage Road near the middle school, we all know how pickup drop-off time goes there. We've requested that MnDOT do this project in the summer months so that we're not competing with the line over there. Lastly, from a financial perspective, it is standard procedure for the city to cost share on traffic signal replacements on MnDOT highways. So being that 2 of the 4 directions at both of these intersections, Pleasant and Westview, are city roads, our cost share of the traffic signals is 50%. The city's estimated cost would be around $550,000, which includes our share of the signals, relocating some power facilities for our traffic lights. We own and maintain the lights along 55. And then there'd also be minor utility repairs and relocations for our storm sewer. It's important to note that that $550,000 is going to be paid from our municipal state aid account. So that's not looking to come from general funds. The balance in our municipal state aid account has been being saved in preparation for 61, and we have just under $3 million in that account right now. So with 61 still being a few years out, funds continuing to go into that account, we don't anticipate that this 550 will adversely affect that account to a point that we won't still be ready for 61 when it arrives. The last note I wanted to make is MnDOT does have plans at River and Pine Street in 2028 to also replace those signals. So it'll be a very similar scope, but just wanted to put that out there, just similar cost in 4 years down the road. So that's all I have on the presentation. Stand for any questions if there are any.
Great. Thank you, Cody. Any questions, Councilmember Fox?
Thank you, Your Honor. Cody, thank you for this information. I did just look up the 46 in Goodwin, construction should be done within the week. So that will not affect it.
Yeah, that's a good point, Councilmember Fox. Thank you. We did talk to county staff and gave them a just, you're sure? right?
Yeah.
It's
Like,
gonna be
nothing's
done.
gonna-
Yes.
So just saying that out loud for our public, but also, one thing we've been talking a lot about with the 61 project and in stakeholder engagement stuff is placemaking and like awareness of like being in Hastings and what that looks like. Do we know yet what that will take, what form it will take on 61? Like, will we have different lighting? I don't know. Should they match is ultimately my question, and will they be different?
Yes, Councilmember Fox, that's a good question. I think as far as the placemaking goes in 61, things you've probably heard at our open houses and some of our preliminary scoping is things like our herringbone pattern, things like banners. Lighting is something, to be honest, that Ryan and I are in process of evaluating. 61 and 55 are different corridors in terms of ambient lighting. 61, a little bit closer, more ambient light from businesses. It's something that we want to review for efficiency to say, let's not have giant light poles all over if they're really not providing any benefit, because between traffic and adjacent businesses, we're getting sufficient light. So lighting as a topic is something specific and separate that we are thinking about, talking about with MnDOT, and we're going to sync up on 61 and kind of look at 55 as a whole corridor, because we were thinking about it with this project. Is this the time to attack it and start it? But we thought because we're doing such a small piece, we didn't want it to be a spot treatment for lighting. Just that the lighting is on there? Oh, yes, I guess for synchronization of how they look. These will be galvanized signals. So the silver ones, if you go to like 15th Street and 61, the poles will match that, and that's kind of the new MnDOT standard. So I guess from the signals themselves, they will match with what we're doing on 61. But then for lighting and placemaking, I'm going to say to be determined. It's on our minds. We'll bring you more on that.
Thank you, Councilmember Fox. Councilmember Liefeld.
Yeah, and I'd like to make a motion to consider the resolution of intent to participate in the MnDOT Highway 55 signal replacement project.
Okay, motion's been made by Councilmember Liefeld and a second by Councilmember Verichoff. Council, do you have any other new discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion, I'm sorry? Okay, in favor of the motion, state by saying aye. 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 Opposed to that motion, state by saying nay. Yeah. Good. All right. Thanks, Cody. Under Ryan Stemsky again, we have the approval of the industrial park water tower plans and specifications with exception to the prevailing wage policy and authorize advertising for bids.
Yes, you have me one more time.
Yes.
Mayor, members of the council, this is a similar project we did a couple years ago that I'll reference a little bit, but these are always interesting projects to kind of unravel and take apart because they are expensive. This is our industrial park water tower reconditioning. Here's a photo of how that looks and exists today. I really like to dive into what is a reconditioning, and really what we start out with is we're trying to protect that substrate of the tower, so the existing elements of the tower. It includes the interior of the tower, an interior wet area and an interior dry area. And it also includes the exterior coatings that you see from walking around the tower, driving around the tower. Our paint and our coating life right now is at 28 years of age. We've had multiple inspections on it to make sure that it's safe and that we've got a reliable system. But really the coatings that are on that tower have a life expectancy about 20 to 25 years. It was about 3 years ago when we had our last inspection by KLM, who said, well, you're getting there. You probably got about 3 more years. You should program it within that 3 years, and we're at that 3rd year. So we're aligned with our inspections on the tower. And I always like to say, it's not just the paint job I just went through. It actually is a lot more than that. I'll show you some photos of what happens inside the tower when we don't have things like a submersible mixer that keeps ice from forming inside your tower and helps with the water quality of what we're delivering to our customers. We also, just to upgrade with the LED style lights, all of that would be included on the interior and exterior of the building for safety and inspection purposes. And then the aviation lights on top are out of compliance and would need an upgrade with this project as well. There's a lot of ventilation areas that do not meet OSHA standards, and climbing areas that need different laddering and railing elements to get up into OSHA compliance. In addition to that, structural modifications and repairs, a lot of welds and elements that are just, the paint gets removed and corrosion starts to happen, and now we're out of our AWA and Minnesota Department of Health compliance. So we've got an inventory of all of the structural modifications and repairs in there. And then kind of lastly to touch on is a lot of the railing upgrades and the wireless that is on top of our tower that generate revenue for us. You'll see a photo of that too. It's kind of a mess and needs some upgrading there as well. So here's a photo of the upper shell inside the tower, and this is caused by ice. You can see, just like if you are on a lake in Minnesota in the wintertime and you're beating against that ice surface, that's what it looks like in our tower. So that shell is starting to break through and crack up, and we can counter this by keeping ice from forming with that mixer installation. It's been working great on our 4th Street tower. Here's just, it kind of shows inside the bowl as you're looking up at the tower. There's inventoried micro cracking going on, meaning our coatings are failing, starting to fail. There's sweating that's causing rust and deterioration of the tower. So these are all caught in inspection. Here's our top of our tower. I love this photo. Look at all those antenna and components and wires to trip over. These wires, you can see the black wires coming to the central railing there. They all shoot down our tube into the tower, and they're just everywhere you can imagine. I don't even know how our folks get up there. So not safe. This is what happens is they set temporary towers during the project. We'll pull all these components off. It'll be like a brand new unencumbered tower. Your carriers will set up temporary service for cell coverage, and then we'll go through a whole new design. We make the providers do that per Corey's attention to our leases. They pay for that component, and then they put it on under new engineering regulation to meet our current standards. And my goal is to see this picture being nice and organized, not like my closet at home. So those are some of the components. So I just like to share that to let you know it's more than just a paint job. Tonight, we're also actually asking for an exception to the prevailing wage policy for city projects. This is a city resolution that was amended back in 2022 to allow exception to it for unique projects. So this is something that we actually passed in advance of the 2022 4th Street water tower reconditioning, and that worked out very well. We got competitive, attractive bids. We saved an estimated $200,000 to $300,000 with that project. And on this one, KLM, who does this all over the country, is estimating about that $300,000 or more in this current environment of bidding if we remove this exemption. This is specialized work, so local folks aren't necessarily bidding on hanging on the side of a tower. They don't have the specialized equipment or manpower. We see the same 5, 6, 7 bidders across the country that come in and bid on this work, very specific and unique. We're trying to time this out a little bit. Right now is in this region is where they're wrapping up in the September month. And so their focus is on wrap up of their projects across the country, at least in the warmer or the colder climates. And then they'll start to look in this region to bid on the very first projects in October. So we're trying to time ourselves out with having the design plans and specs done, going to council for approval to go to bid in October. So that's kind of what we're doing here. And this exemption is very important for us to come on budget with the project. Some exterior options. we have replaced the existing logo. So this is kind of what we did on the 4th Street Tower. If folks have driven by there lately. And if you haven't, I just have to play a video real quick so you can see it. It's only 1 minute, I promise.
So cool. Very cool.
Okay, sorry, but I had to show it. I'm proud of that project and had to show it off a little bit. Okay, so that would be if council informs staff to mimic our logoing. That's a tank white color made by one of our key suppliers. Great product. We have all the coloring. We know how to do that. Looks great, I think. There's an option since this is in Vets Park. Now, this is, KLM gave us a representation of what could be. This is recognizing that this tower is in a city park and that there's city park things going on. This is called a 360-degree sports wrap. You can make it specific to your community, what goes on the park, other ideas and elements of what you would want to display is something that you can do. It's probably about a $15,000 cost to put the 2 logos on that I just showed. If we did a sports wrap, it's probably about a little over 40 grand to do the sports wrap. So there's an additional cost to this, obviously, to do 360 degrees around the tower. But it gives you some thoughts. We don't have to decide this tonight. I'm just trying to get folks to think about this and give staff feedback. We'll probably touch base at a later date. We really don't need this until we're kind of approving shop drawings with a contractor, and we haven't even gotten out to bid yet. So here's an example of a project our engineer KLM did. I think this was up in Moorhead. They have their city logo in a couple locations, and then they did a wrap, and then they brought in things that were special and unique to their community. So just kind of shows you, it doesn't have to be the black silhouette. It can be something that incorporates in for that same charge. This was about the $40,000 upcharge. Okay, so next steps. We talked about, we're here tonight looking to have council approve resolution with the exception to the prevailing wage policy and authorizing that for bids in October. October, our project would be out for bids, and so we'd come back to the council after that bid time frame, probably sometime in November, with hopefully good news on a project award. Then the project really wouldn't begin because we have winter in Minnesota until April or May. But that's important to go out now to position ourselves for our best bids, and then get that contractor thinking about Hastings coming here first. And if weather allows, we could get started in April. It's important because we have a 14-week construction to do everything that you just saw. And that probably puts us into about mid-July timeframe. And what happens in mid-July, that's when our irrigation demands are the highest, our water use is calling, and that's an important tower to get back up on the system as soon as we can. So important that we stay on schedule and get out ahead of that as best we can. So with that, I'll stand for any questions or look for council to approve resolution.
Thank you, Ryan. I have to say, you're a guy who loves your work, being a public works director, and I love the tidiness of the top of the tower that has been finished, so, thank you. Councilmember Liefeld.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to make a motion to consider resolution to approve industrial park water tower reconditioning plans and specifications with exception to the prevailing wage policy on city projects and to authorize advertisement for bids.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Liefeld. Councilmember Fox.
I'll second with a question.
Okay,
and a
motion and a second. Discussion, council?
Ryan, thank you for the description of why we're making an exception to the prevailing wage in Minnesota. That is very unique for us to be doing that, and prevailing wage is really important for workers' rights. So thank you for describing that to our public. The temporary cell service towers, there were some downfalls with a few of the service providers on the 4th Street Tower. If that happens, which it maybe won't, should the individuals contact their service provider?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
We work with, through our lease process, to get them proper notice so that they're notified and have a period of time to set up their plan.
Great.
And then we implement the plan. And then the same thing for them to come back on. We say, hey, this is when we're projected to be ready for you again. And we'll start to get your design to put you back on. So we're trying to get them off and on as quick as possible with way advanced notification. But really, if folks have a problem with their service, they need to voice their complaint to their particular provider.
Thank you.
Some were great, some weren't so
Right.
much. So it's a good point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Fox. Councilmember Verichov.
Thank you, Mayor. I shared, I think, Ryan, when this came before Finance Committee probably last week or so, that I feel like I have a special affliction for our local water towers because I have a 2.5-year-old niece who thinks that these are Peppa the Pig's castles. And so we spend a lot of time by the water towers. We knock on the door. We ask if we can go in. Peppa's never home. So I'm very thankful for this presentation tonight and seeing the actual inner workings. And I echo what Councilmember Fox said in terms of being able to have a better understanding of all the things that go into this. It's not necessarily just repainting. So thank you for that explanation. Thank you for the graphics. I think this is incredibly helpful. I also appreciated your comments about prevailing wage as well. I just totally lost my train of thought. I started thinking about Peppa the Pig. Sorry. This was a great presentation. I was happy about that. What was the thing that came up in Finance Committee about this?
That they have garage doors.
Oh, that they have the garage doors, but it wasn't that. I'm sorry, Mayor. I totally lost my train of thought. I started thinking about Peppa the Pig. Ryan, you've just given so many good presentations tonight. I just can't even, yeah.
You were just hoping I showed an option.
I was
with
just hoping
Peppa
that you
Pig
showed the option,
Full tower
yes.
painting. I apologize.
Yes, I'm great. Okay, sorry, I got it back. Thank you for staying with me. Okay, I know what it was. It was when we were talking about prevailing wage, we were talking about the idea of possibly saving $300,000 on a bid for this. And so I think that I speak for myself as somebody that, of course, lives here in Hastings, and for so many members of our public, that we have all of these different costs that are coming before council right now. And so I just want to publicly thank Public Works and the engineers that are doing this work, putting these presentations together and saying, hey, we know that we are spending money, but this is very much, what is the saying, a penny wise, a pound foolish? And so is it the other way? While we're spending this money now, we know that these are preventative projects that we're taking on to save us money going down the path. And so when we're looking at something like the water tower, or we're looking at something like the traffic lights, where they're already 25, 28 years old or something like that. And so while we see that this is a lot of funding that's coming before council and these resolutions to approve, we know that we talk about this as a body quite a bit, that we have to be mindful of what this looks like for future councils that are going to come after us, what this looks like for people that are moving here and want to make this their community. We want to make sure that there are beautiful things like our water towers, like our infrastructure, like our traffic signals. So I'm very thankful for you going into depth and explaining all of this, and then also presenting us with a cost savings idea as well. Thank you. Sorry, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Verichov. There is a motion and a second. No other discussion. All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. And that motion prevails. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Tonight, under public safety, we have a special vehicles on city streets. And for this, we will have a introduction by our police chief, Dave Wilski. Welcome, chief.
No, you're all good.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. It's always hard to follow Stemski here.
Right.
So to give you a little bit of backstory, we're going to talk about all-terrain vehicles this evening. This went before Public Safety Committee on 2 different sessions, and we had some lengthy discussions about this, and also some community members that are in favor of this and also spoke at those committee meetings. So today, I know this looks like a lot. I'll be brief. Current ordinance review so that we're clear on what our ordinance is. All-terrain vehicle info, what really some of the acronyms are in regards to all-terrain vehicles or ATVs. State laws, our snowmobile ordinance, and then recommendations and possible action by City Council. So Hastings Ordinance 70.02 allows for somebody to drive an ATV on city streets. That permit does require a disability. An example would be cannot walk 200 feet without resting, cannot walk without aid, difficulty walking, risk of fall without risk of falling, respiratory disease, oxygen supplement required, cardiac condition. They do require vehicle insurance, a physician letter to safely operate, slow-moving emblem, and a rear-view mirror. And City Council recently approved a side-by-side under this ordinance. My understanding was there was a little bit of confusion in the public because that came before council, and people were under the impression that ATVs are now allowed in the city of Hastings, which is not the case. But we do have a current ordinance that does allow it for some. I think currently in the city we have 1 permit that is out there. Past discussions, just so you're aware if you were not on council, this was brought up at the council level in 91, 2015, and 2020. So although ATVs and UTVs have been gaining a lot of traction over the years, they've been around for a long time, and some members of the public have inquired about possibly allowing them on city streets. The Public Safety Advisory Commission did review this in November of 2019. Chief Schaefer was here at the time. There was a couple of key findings. ATV fatalities, he went through some of that. 74% of fatal crashes took place on paved roadways, according to an analysis. You can read it there. The Fatality Analysis Reporting System. I don't have those current numbers in regards to fatalities. One thing I will say along those lines is manufacturers of ATVs and UTVs do not recommend they're driven on roadways. It's just, it's probably a safety precaution. Their attorneys tell them. No offense, Corey, but their attorneys tell them not to, that they're not safe for city travel. They're meant for off-road. And then consumer warnings from manufacturers, federal agencies, and consumer and safety advocates say all-terrain vehicles are unsafe on roadways. But we see them. When we leave our community, we do see them on county roads, and I will get to that. Recommendation from the February 2020 council memo was to recommend no changes to our ordinance 70.02. So terminology on all-terrain vehicle types. If you go through the Minnesota DNR book on all-terrain vehicles, it's very long, it's very lengthy, it's very confusing. So these classifications are from the Minnesota DNR. ATV or an all-terrain vehicle includes a Class 1 and Class 2 vehicle. Per the Minnesota, I have DVR, it's DNR. A Class 1 ATV, that's a width is 50 inches or less. So think of a four-wheeler. I have an example in the upper left-hand corner. That's one that you straddle. It has handlebars. This particular model has a 2-up seat, so it can carry 2 passengers on this ATV. A Class 2 is a width of 50 to 65 inches. Think of a side-by-side. They come in a variety of models. They have 2-person side-by-side, 4-person, some have dump boxes in the back. They have power windows, heat, air conditioning, a number of options that you can get with them now. And then the DNR class is a UTV, as a utility task vehicle or utility terrain vehicle, another name for a side-by-side. So oftentimes you hear UTV, they're often referring to that as a side-by-side. And then we have an OHV, and this is all-encompassing according to the Minnesota DNR. This is an off-highway vehicle. This could be a car, a truck, an ATV, an off-road motorcycle. They just refer to those as OHVs. And the reason I think this is important, when you hear some of this terminology, you can kind of picture that in your mind what folks are talking about. Make sure I'm on the right page here. So Minnesota state laws, and this is, it's very broad in the DNR pamphlet or the information online in regards to ATVs. I'm just going to touch on a couple of things. The reason I bring this up is If you do leave the city of Hastings jurisdiction, you will see UTVs, ATVs on the side of roadways. And it is allowed. Why is it allowed? Because that jurisdiction does not have an ordinance against it. So for Class 1 ATVs, they can operate in the ditch, outside bank, or slope of a truck, county state aid, or county highway. They prefer on the roadway because when you start taking ATVs, UTVs into the ditches, sometimes there's issues with private property and how it butts up to that roadway, and also there are buried utility lines that often get dug up. Registered use for agricultural purposes is also authorized, and then far right side of township roads. Class 2 ATVs can operate, if there's no ordinance, right shoulder or extreme right-hand side of county state aid or county highway, and then on the bank, slope, or ditch of a public road right-of-way, not if on private property. So it can be kind of confusing. So I really encourage people, if you're in an area that doesn't have an ordinance, really research what kind of roadway that is and any local ordinances or what the DNR would allow. I bring up snowmobiles because we do have an ordinance in regards to snowmobiles. They are allowed to travel on city roads to get to a snowmobile access. Snowmobiles aren't made for the roadway. If you talk to snowmobilers, they don't want to drive them on the roadways, but we do have snowmobile trails. The snowmobile clubs have really done a great job of talking to private owners of land and some public areas, and have really strong trails in our area. We don't get many complaints to the police department in regards to snowmobiles misbehaving. Some UTV concerns, if the ordinance change, it would be difficult to enforce due to off-road capabilities of these vehicles because they are made to go off-road, can easily do that. Currently already receive complaints of UTVs on roadways. I bring that up, especially for Tuttle Park and Tuttle Drive. We have some residents out there, reports of kids on ATVs, on motorcycles in our city parks. Oftentimes, and I'm saying the vast majority, we get up there and we are not locating them. So we're very reactive to those calls for service, and we're not finding the people that are offending. And then we don't have ATV trails in the area, and that's why I bring up the snowmobile ordinance. There is a means to an end in that snowmobiles are trying to get to an authorized trail, and we want to provide them that access. Therefore, we allow on certain roadways that they can travel in the wintertime to get to the snowmobile trails. We don't have any ATV trails surrounding our community. That might change in the future, I don't know, but it's not like up north, when you think of up north where they have state parks and state lands where it's very prevalent. Community ordinances, I could not locate any Dakota County city that allows ATVs on city streets. I contacted all the chiefs, they're just not allowed. The county doesn't have an ordinance currently, so they are allowed, you follow the state laws in regards to travel with a UTV or an ATV. Red Wing is the only community really in the South Metro that I found, and by South Metro I mean Dakota County. I talked to Cannon Falls, talked to Red Wing. They allow UTVs on their city streets, not in their downtown district, and I'm just summarizing their ordinance. I don't have that with me today. But I don't consider that really apples to apples. The reason I say that, the most recent count for Highway 61 in Red Wing was in 2019. And that count was 23,000 vehicles per day. The most recent count for Hastings on traffic on Vermilion or Highway 61 near the River Bridge in 2023 was 35,400 vehicles. And that makes sense. We're closer to the metro area. I know the dates are off a little bit, but I don't think those numbers have changed that drastically. We're closer to the metro area, and we have more travel on our main thoroughfare through our community. I did talk to the Red Wing chief. He said they don't have a lot of issues down there with their UTV ordinance. He also did let me know that it's not a priority with them. He was just being very honest. He said they're very reactive. If they do get a complaint, they go out and check it out. But they're not actively out there monitoring UTV and ATV use. So public safety recommendation, and these really are my concerns, and you have to understand, I am not somebody that's against UTV or ATVs. I'm sure we have enthusiasts in the room. I own a side-by-side myself. I don't travel on city roads. I use it on my property, and they have a lot of applications, so I'm not against them. We do have a Highway 61 or Vermilion project that's coming up. That is always in the back of our minds. That is going to push a lot of vehicles into our arteries. Enforcement can be difficult, which I mentioned before, because of the off-road capabilities. The state of Minnesota doesn't license these. It's up to the owner to put their permit number, to make a permit number and put it on their vehicle, meaning their UTV. Manufacturers, like I said, don't recommend them on the roadways. There's no trails in our area. Really what it comes down to, my perspective, is we're always trying to reduce the conflicts on our roadways between vehicles, bicycles, scooters, whatever it might be, and this would add to those conflicts between vehicles, bicycles, and UTVs. And then cost. A rough estimate is $170 per permit, and I did talk to the code department about how we came up with that number. We would have to get stickers, and then there's employee time. For the application processing, for law enforcement, we'd have to go out there and inspect that UTV and make sure that it had everything that council wanted if you were to change the ordinance. So really what I'm hoping for tonight is either a motion to change ordinance 70.02 or start that process from council, or to allow ATVs on city streets, or a motion to keep the ordinance 70.02 as it is. And I would definitely entertain any questions. I'll do my best to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. So, council discussion. Dan, did you want to say something?
Yeah, if I could interject. Appreciate the information and background. As Chief mentioned, this was discussed at 2 Public Safety Committee of Council meetings. Although that committee did not vote a specific recommendation, I do think it should be clear that the general consensus or discussion of those meetings was supportive of changing the ordinance in order to allow adults to utilize these vehicles on city streets. I just want to make sure that that's part of the presentation.
Thank you, Dan. Councilmember Liefeld?
Thank you, Your Honor. Thanks, Chief, for the data that you're presenting to us. I do have a question that might be Councilor Lands here. So are there any insurance concerns in the event of an accident, since the manufacturer expressly says we do not suggest these be used on paved roads? Does that present a problem?
Your Honor, members of the council, we actually do require insurance. So whether or not they can get insurance is the second question. We do have a carve-out in our ordinance that says if you can get regular automobile coverage and somehow get them to sort of adopt an addendum for this particular vehicle, we need to see some proof of insurance, but that is a requirement under the permit.
And so that would be up to the owner of the UTV or ATV to support that to us. So in addition to that, so I'm in support of this. The chief knows that when we had our discussions. Still have to follow all the laws and rules. You must be a licensed driver over the age of 16. You still have to follow, all of the other requirements. I think, and what we talked about was writing into place, not on 55, 46, 61, and 316. You know what I mean? We talked about what that would look like. So just from a standpoint of the Public Safety Committee, we talked at great lengths about this, and we had some wonderful conversations with some residents who came out and gave us some information. And, I drive a scooter, right? I sort of akin this to that, in a way, to me. I wear a helmet and I follow the traffic laws. And then we talked a lot about the electric bikes that are out there. And the scooters, the little scooter thingies, not like my motorcycle scooter. So we talked about that and what that looks like from a public safety concern as well. So looking at this, I sort of take a position that this is a lot like chickens. I think this is one of those things that people are like, boy, I just don't think I want to do this. I don't think it would be a good idea. I think we're going to get a lot of complaints. And then we haven't. We had so many conversations, and probably similar to the dates that you gave there, over and over and over, that it came before council, and then we finally voted it in. And we've not seen an issue. So my position is that we would proceed, and I would make a motion that we look to draft a change to 70.02 of the current ordinance to reflect the approval of UTV and ATVs with the limitations of what we will yet to decide, right?
Can I make one clarification,
Please.
council member? Your scooter, just so you know,
Yeah.
is recognized by the state of Minnesota as a motor vehicle on the roadway, authorized to be on the roadway. That's, just so you understand that, that's the only difference. It's licensed by the state, whereas UTVs are not licensed, they're permits. So council would be allowing essentially an unlicensed motor vehicle on the roadway. I just want to make sure you understand that
I
aspect of it.
definitely see that when I look at it from a safety standpoint, however. You know, I think things will, I think we'll see changes in the future to this. It's not uncommon for us to be one of the cities that's looking to make choices for our residents, and we could follow the, let's sit back and watch and see what other communities do, right? Or we can give it a try and see if it's something that we can make work and benefit our community. So that's my position, and there is a motion on the floor.
Thank you, Councilmember Liefeld. Councilmember Verichov.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate Councilmember Liefeld's comments, and I tend to agree with her. Chief, I'm really grateful for your presentation and everything that you brought through us tonight. I think that you know that I serve Ward 1, which is Cowtown, and then kind of goes all the way down. And so a lot of the folks that I represent up here on the dais have big pieces of property, or, they live next to water or the river or stuff like that. And so we do have a lot of side-by-sides and stuff that are being used. And so just so that I'm clear of two things. Number one, what we're saying is that if we vote in support of this tonight, we are sending this back to the committee to do the work to put that rule together. No, that's not what we're saying, Mayor?
You can, but it can also just go to staff for to change the ordinance.
To change the ordinance.
Doesn't have
Okay,
to go back to
so that's
committee.
what the motion is here. And then, Chief, again, it's very, very seldom that I really ever want to disagree with you. And so, just so that I better understand, so if somebody came over to my neighborhood and saw my neighbors, driving something like that this weekend, but it was on a residential street and not one of the county streets, right? That is not the issue here. It's not necessarily a matter of a street or whatnot. If they're using that as an access point to kind of get to some of the property that's a little bit farther down, is that necessarily problematic?
Currently, without a permit from the city, you cannot drive them on a city road.
Even if we're just using it to go off into the?
Even if you're just using it to go, yeah, according to our ordinance, they are not legal unless
Okay.
you have a permit.
Okay,
And we have one resident in our community that has a permit.
only one resident, and we know that we have much more than one resident that's currently doing this. And so if I was driving a side-by-side and you were to pull me over and I did not have a permit for that, what would I would get a ticket, I would assume, of?
It'd be an ordinance violation.
Okay.
You could receive a citation for
Okay.
that.
And that would be, and then I would have to pay a fee or something like that,
Correct.
correct, okay. I just wanted to make sure that I understood what the penalty was and what we were trying to perhaps change, if that was the case. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Verichov. Chief, I just, have a couple, maybe not even questions, just comments. My mind always gonna go to safety. I live in an area where I do see these vehicles on the street, children driving, no helmets, no parental guidance. That's where my head goes and my heart goes. If someone were to get hurt, say we leave it the way it is, and someone were to get hurt on our streets, and they're not 16 years old, they're under, how does it have anything to do with the city? It shouldn't,
If
right?
an illegal vehicle is on the roadway? No, I mean, they could obviously receive a citation for it, but it would most likely come down to insurance. Insurance companies do offer insurance for these types of vehicles. even liability insurance. So generally, that's the direction that it would go if somebody were to get hurt on the roadway.
So even if it does, if we send it for our ordinance update, children shouldn't be driving on the streets. I just want the public to hear this, because it is a very deep concern of mine in the area I live. I see them often.
Yeah, and Mayor, I appreciate that, and that would really be up to the ordinance, the language in the ordinance, what we're gonna allow, whether they're gonna have turn signals, mirrors, these would all be the recommendations, an age limit on when they can operate them. So that can all be included in the ordinance. I just would caution that let's not get too much in the weeds, because it gets really confusing for our residents if we were to enact this.
Right. I more want the public to know that these vehicles are already seen on our streets illegally and unsafely. My other point is resources for our department, for you. Could we do it like the chicken ordinance and say, okay, we're gonna do this, and we're gonna, if we get a lot of situations in 6 months, we can come back and remove or add to, or?
We could always make updates to the ordinance or repeal. I think it's not always well received if we have an experimental period and then we decide, nah, this really isn't working out for us. So that can be met with a lot of frustration. But can it be done? Absolutely it can. But my recommendation would be, if we're going to go forward with updating the ordinance, then we determine what we're going to allow, we update the ordinance, and address those issues if they occur. I don't feel like, even though I have concerns about this, I don't think it's going to be like up north. For example, I have family that live in Moose Lake. I was just up there. It's almost 30% on the roadway are UTVs, and they're kids, and they're going 70 miles an hour down county roads. It's incredible. I don't think we're going to have those issues, but we'll probably have some. We're going to have some complaints and some issues in driving on lawns and things of that nature.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Councilmember Lawrence?
Just go back to what you're saying, Mayor, with safety. Working my other job firsthand, I've seen Silverado versus ATV, and it's a terrible, terrible scene. So that's just where my brain goes, because coming down these streets, whatever, we can say go slow, but people go crazy. And, even the other scooters you're talking about, the standing ones, it's insane the amount that are on their streets. But again, you don't have anything to stop it. So just keep that in mind. Yes, I get it. I am an outdoorsman as well. But again, time and place for these vehicles. So just my 2 cents for that.
Thank you, Councilmember Lawrence. Councilmember Fox?
Thank you, Your Honor. I will second Councilmember Liefeld's motion. I hope that with this, we actually do see safety in it. To the mayor's point, these are on our streets. I see them in Ward 2 often. We talked at our committee meeting. Everyone's garage is full of them. So like they're gonna go out, right? We're gonna see them on the streets, and the question will be, do we see more ATVs, UTVs than permits that are out? So hopefully what we see is that we're actually able to enforce the ordinance. Again, to Chief's point, reacting to ordinances in a negative way and rescinding freedoms is not what we're here for. We want people to be safe and have opportunities to play and have fun. And my questions then go kind of akin to what Councilmember Lawrence was just saying. Where do those motorized bikes fall, and where do e-bikes fall, and where do standing scooters fall? We had special use permits or something like that for the bird and the spin scooters, and those we saw broken every day. So what I am begging our community for is to be lawful and to be careful and be diligent about your permitting, because this is an opportunity if it does prevail. We'll see. But a couple things I do want to mention too that we talked about in our committee is that we don't have trails. We don't have ATV, UTV trails, and you can't ride them on someone's private property. So I'm also throwing that out there. So when people mention that if you have your own property, that's one thing, right? We have lots of that happening in Hastings too. But riding just on the street to get from one destination to the other is riding in an unauthorized vehicle that we are choosing to permit. So I'm clarifying, yeah. So those are my points. I personally don't have them, and I'm afraid of them, so, for the record.
Thank you, Councilmember Fox. Okay, there is a motion and a second. No other discussion. All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed to that motion state by saying nay.
Nay.
And the motion prevails. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay. Under administration, tonight we have a resolution to approve the preliminary 2025 city property tax levy. And Dan, you are on.
What do I do here? I'm not losing my train of thought.
I got you. That's right.
What's this one?
You're trying to go to your presentation?
I want the regular meeting presentation.
Yep, go down here.
But we might, I think you'll be okay because,
That guy.
Nice.
we had our worship, we get it, sure, so. He was gonna pass it. How about the chocolates? I didn't.
I feel so appreciated. Thank you, Chief.
All right. The administrator walks away and it falls apart.
Wait till I get to the PFAS update.
All right. Council?
A lot of this is going to be recap because before this meeting, we had a budget workshop with the city council. But obviously, we also know that we have some people in the audience. We also have people online or that watch it afterwards. So I think that on the possibility that council will vote on the preliminary budget, we should give some overview of what's in it. This is much shorter than what we had at our workshop. Quick index to what we'll be talking here. Want to highlight a few of the key changes on both the revenue and the expense side of the proposed budget. This is a increase of 7.5%, $1.4 million, so it's about a $20 million levy in comparison to other cities in the county and the area. Preliminary, early, unofficial draft numbers, it sounds like they're in the 8 to 10% range for the most part, some higher, some lower. So hopefully we're a little bit under what others are doing. On the average house, the median value house, so half the homes in town are valued under $313,000, half are over that. On that median value house, this property tax would be a $106 increase over their current. Also, just some other pieces to note that there are other revenues in there besides the property tax levy, but that's the key piece. Both ongoing things, negotiating with our Rural Fire Association contract, or some one-time revenues using some existing on fund balance or reserves to accomplish one-time projects. Some of the key expenses, what are we getting for this money? Some new staff. We are looking at 2 new full-time firefighter EMT positions. This is the third year of a phased-in effort to add 6 firefighters. So this will bring that complement up completed. A second school resource officer is proposed. Half of that expense will be covered by the school district. But as we've certainly seen in prior conversations, the workload is just really increased over the last few years. What had initially been essentially a high school position is high school and middle school. So just really recognizing that there's some needs there that we would like to meet. The other piece isn't really a position, but I view it that way. It would be contracted out, but 3 years ago, we had 3 positions: a public works director, a city engineer, and a principal engineer. And with some staffing changes, when we had an interim position in that director role, we had 2 positions, the director and an engineer, and we left in there, in the budget, the funding for the third position, so that on a as-needed basis, we had monies to contract out with private engineering firms in order to do inspections and project management and some of those pieces. But as we're efficient and updated our lists of positions, we said this position's vacant and doesn't exist, so we axed it out of the budget and really do have some staffing needs to be able to supplement our engineering departments. So putting in some deliberate funding in order to be able to continue that contracted engineering service. Other pieces in there, cost of doing business, 3.5% COLA. Most of that is in our union contracts already negotiated, but matching that on the non-union side. Also, there's various inflationary type increases, significant increase in our debt service going forward as we took on some additional projects this past year. And do note that between now and December, there's a few things that aren't settled yet, so we will have sort of an update at final numbers as we meet in December. Number of infrastructure projects. Also really want to emphasize a lot of interest in asset management. So we have buildings and facilities and vehicles and equipment, and over the last couple of years, I think we've been making a much more deliberate effort at maintaining these and wanting to continue that effort. We, in the past, have had a unofficial practice of drive the vehicles into the ground, and maybe that makes sense from a personal standpoint, but actually it doesn't make sense from a financial standpoint for the city, as well as just safety and upkeep for making sure we've got our people in good vehicles. And similar, a lot of deferred maintenance that I'm glad that we're tackling that, but it's cheaper to address the issues than to kick the can down the road. So continue efforts on that. A lot of lines here. I think the most important piece, if you see the 2 orange bars on the far right side, 2024 and preliminary 2025, really very little increase in the tax capacity or the tax base for the coming year. So although we are recommending an increase in the levy, it's having a more dramatic increase on the tax rate because the property values did not increase the way they had the last couple of years. But it's good to keep that updated so we can see the trends over time. Some of this I mentioned a minute ago, but I think it bears repeating. The average value house would see a $106 increase on the city's portion of the property taxes. Obviously, there's also county and school district on there, but the city portion would increase $106 per year. Extrapolate higher or lower if you've got a house over or under the average median value. Important piece talk about is utilities. And it's been a huge discussion that we've had for the past couple of years. It was a significant, in the background, significant conversation earlier this evening. But that number one item under utility capital items, water treatment plant number one, first step in addressing our PFAS and nitrates issues, that $20.6 million project means we'll need to raise some money. I heard earlier we're seeking and trying to get grants and outside funding and assistance, but we're also on a timeline and we can't wait for grants and outside assistance. So the recommendation tonight is a 37.3% increase in the water rates. The sewer and stormwater also have much more modest increases, and those actually come from the rate studies that we've done every 2 or 3 years to sort of check in and try to avoid having drastic swings and try to have sort of a steady amount every year so that it's predictable. So also see a number of projects that we're looking at this year, the utility portion of the neighborhood project, some of the things that we do every year with sewer rehabilitation or some other lesser improvements, the water tower reconditioning that we saw earlier this evening. PFAS and nitrates can't get through a conversation without bringing up PFAS. $20.6 million. I do want to point out that this is sort of the worst case scenario. We already have, and that's 37% increase in water rates. We already have a $1 million grant for the planning and design, so 20.6 becomes 19.6. Anticipate the connection for the veterans home is part of that figure. Depending on the math, it could be $1 million to $1.7 million. So maybe that 20.6 is 19.6, and now it's 18 or thereabouts. Later this month or early October, we're hoping to get good news. I don't like bad news. That we might get a $3 million emerging contaminants grant. So now your $18 million figure might be closer to 15. And where that's all important is when council comes back in early December to set the final budget, you could say, hey, it's not a $20.6 million project, it's a $15 or $16 million project. Instead of 37% increase in water rates January 1, let's do, whatever the math is, 28%. Still a big increase, but moving in the right direction. So just wanted to point out that moving target. The official number right now is 37.3%. Also, I think it's important to note, this is my staff. The police chief you met earlier, the public works director, community development, fire department. They did a fantastic job trying to be very conscious. They do this every year, but I certainly saw it in the budget proposal this year, trying to make sure that where we're spending the public's money, we're doing a good and responsible job at it. Mentioned the asset management, it saves money in the long run. The capital project prioritization, let's make sure we're doing the right projects. There might be a lot of stuff we want, can't afford to all of it, let's make sure we do the ones that matter the most. We changed vendors in order to save money. We did some right sizing to reduce some of the equipment replacements. We're looking at getting rebates, delaying some projects that aren't necessarily right now. I mentioned the prevailing wage discussion earlier. The same people doing the same work, we can save our water ratepayers $300,000 by waiving that. Also being aggressive at getting early bids and competitive bids. We saw the Highway 55 signals earlier. What wasn't talked about is a month ago, MnDOT was talking about Hastings' local share being $1 million. And in working with them and looking at some early estimates for that project, able to get it down to that 550 figure. So $450,000 savings for our taxpayers. So just I think it's important to know that there's a lot of efficiencies and belt tightening already worked into the budget. Also, I think it's worth pointing out the budget ties back to our strategic plan and priorities that the city council set last spring, 2023, in terms of operational effectiveness, improved water treatment, can't get through a conversation without talking about PFAS, and asset management actually was one of the priorities set by the city council. So I think it's important to recognize that these are in line with the council's priorities and direction. Next steps, if you're ready this evening, there's a resolution, actually 2 resolutions on the agenda that you can adopt the preliminary budget and preliminary levy and set the truth and taxation hearing for December 2nd. If you need a little bit more time and want to discuss or follow-up questions, we can bring this back in 2 weeks and come back to the council meeting on the 16th. But we do need to set those preliminary numbers by the end of the month. The public hearing, people get their tax notices from the county in November saying, here's the preliminary math and the numbers and the impact it would have on you. Come to the city council's public hearing on December 2nd. At that meeting on the 2nd, or certainly by the end of the year, you can set the final levy and final budget. If things have changed between now and December, or you get a lot of input on, hey, this is still too tough in this economy, you can lower it. Can't raise it, but you could lower it between now and December. So those are the next steps. Potentially a resolution before you tonight, actually resolution for the general fund as well as the HEDRA, or if you need some more time to think. With that, I'm happy to take questions this evening.
Thank you, Dan.
As a point of
Councilmember Fox.
clarification,
I'm sorry?
just a point of clarification, do we have to vote on them separately?
I would.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Council discussion. Councilmember Verichov.
I just would like to thank all the city staff, the department head, and Dan leading his team in putting this all together as this came through Finance Committee over the past couple of weeks. It was great to see such a mindful eye towards our capital improvements and what we're thinking about as a city, but also being mindful of where we could make cuts as well. I think this is a really good budget, and I strongly support it, and I'd like to make a motion to support it as
Thank you,
such.
Councilmember Verichov.
I'll second that, Your Honor.
Councilmember Leifeld with a second. New discussion, council.
Your Honor.
Councilmember Leifeld.
And just so that people who are listening, the fact that this isn't being discussed right now is because we have discussed this at great lengths. We've had numerous budget meetings as a committee. We've had workshops as a council. So I just don't want people to be like, boy, they sure did talk a whole lot about ATVs. But the budget, so just so people understand, this has been talked about at great lengths. So what you're hearing right now is a group that has come together and talked through all of our questions and our concerns and our differences. And we've come together as, I believe, a cohesive unit that this is in the best interest of our constituents. So again, I'll second that, Your Honor.
Thank you, Councilmember Leifeld. Discussion. I too will say thank you to staff, and we've seen it over and over with the hour-and-a-half workshop right before this meeting, and I feel very comfortable knowing that we are setting standards to do the proper things we need to do, and our surrounding cities we think are going to be a little higher than us. There might be some lower, but this is what we need to get the jobs done within our city without going backwards and keeping anything on hold. So I appreciate staff's work as well. With that, all those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. 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 Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. And that motion prevails. Thanks, Dan. Now we'll have a resolution to approve the proposed 2025 HEDRA HRA special tax levy. Dan, you may continue.
This really is a bit more of a formality. It's not as detailed as the rest, but it is a separate levy for HEDRA under our Housing Economic Development Redevelopment Authority, Housing, I forget what the R is, Redevelopment Authority, special tax levy. Historically, every year we do it at the 0.0185% level and recommend doing that the same this year.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. Council? Councilmember Fox.
I'll make a motion to approve the proposed 2025 HEDRA HRA special tax levy.
Thank you, Councilmember
Second.
Fox. And Councilmember Pemble, second. New discussion, council? All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed by that motion, state by saying nay. And that motion prevails. As it is our first meeting of September, we also will always have a PFAS update, the first meeting of the month. So, Dan, how can you update us?
We had a siting study. But that is the big piece. I appreciate people's patience out in the community as well as council. We had talked about internally staffed. We were hoping to have that in late July, but needed a little bit of time. And then even though we might have come up with a list of potential sites, really wanted to make sure that, it came up earlier tonight. What about, C's Church? What about the owners of Carboni's property? We wanted to talk with them before we suddenly threw this up on a screen in a public meeting. So that took some additional thought and time in order to work through those. And I recognize that some of the properties we talked with also were not interested in going further, and we respected that and, at least at the moment, dropped them from the list. We certainly don't want to force this on any properties that wouldn't want to work that direction. That's the big update in terms of PFAS. The other one I mentioned a minute ago, the budget is looking at the 37.3% increase in water rates effective January 1 in order to, largely in order to pay for the construction or the bond issue on the construction for the first water treatment plant, which would be located in the industrial park. We've got ongoing discussions with the Pollution Control Agency, with environmental studies. We did submit public comments on a wastewater permit for the 3M Cottage Grove site last week. Essentially, our comments on that were, one, there has already been damage done here to our local environment, the River Pool 2, as well as to our drinking water. And although I recognize it's not really part of the wastewater permit, I think that we need to continue our message about we think that should be cleaned up and need assistance on that, and that responsible parties should be held responsible. Also commented on some of the specific measures and monitoring in the proposed permit. There were some specific species of PFAS that were not being required for monitoring, but do have EPA or some other standards. So we felt it was appropriate to watch all the PFAS, or at least all the PFAS that have currently been identified as having particular health concerns. And then the other comment was essentially just a matter of, although they might be required to have an annual meeting for the community to be aware of the status of their permit, wanting to make sure that it's plain English and understood and accessible and transparent to the public in order to know how operations are going there at the 3M Cottage Grove plant. So not directly PFAS, but certainly related, and we did make comments on that last week. So with that, I can take questions.
Thank you, Dan. Council, any questions? Okay, all right, thank you. Council, any announcements? Okay, I have a few. Thursday, summer rec programs at Levy. Thursday, September 5th is Music in the Park with Blvd Variety Show Band, supported by Ruth and George Doffing Charitable Fund. Friday, September 6th is Movies in the Park with Wonka, sponsored by Ardent Mills. Please bring a non-perishable food donation. Saturday, September 7th is Bike with a Ranger on a guided tour of the 10-mile loop. Pre-registration required for this free event. Mattress, box, spring, and document shred event this Saturday, September 7th. Please see the city website for details. The Fire Relief Association's annual Booyah is Saturday, September 14th. Meetings, Monday, September 9th, 7 p.m. There is a Operations Committee meeting, 7 p.m. There is a Planning Commission meeting. Wednesday, September 11th, 6 p.m. Arts and Culture Commission meeting. Thursday, September 12th, 6 p.m. HEDRA. Monday, September 16th, 7 p.m. City Council regular meeting. With that, I would stand for a motion to adjourn. Councilmember Liefeld.
Yeah, I think you missed one, or I nodded off. Rivertown Live, Saturday, September 14th.
Oh, you're right.
Yep. Same day as the Booyah, but later in the day. So if you're looking to get tickets, Rivertown Live. And does anyone know who's playing?
Diamond Rio.
Diamond Rio.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember
welcome.
Liefeld. Still need a motion to adjourn. Councilmember Pemble? And Councilmember Lawrence. No discussion. All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. No opposed. We are adjourned.
It's Diamond Rio and
Something Town.